Sheba is someone who is very, in a way, straightforward, narrow-minded, doesn't really... In the beginning, she was not really open to new ideas. She was down with what she believed in and what she was taught when she was younger, and that was that humans and magic really rule all, are the greatest to exist, and this was placed into her by the magicians that raised her, and she was used as no more than a tool to take magic from the divine staff, or use magic from the divine staff and from herself, which was killing her, and using it to channel these towers. And I'll get into that when I get into the plot and history, but that's where the beginning of Sheba began. She was a young girl and, not very open to new ideas. That's when, after meeting Solomon and the gang, as I call them, Almatoran at the time, well, they weren't called Almatoran, but that was what they would later become, part of it. When she met them, slowly but surely, she began to change after what Solomon said to her, calling her a detestable woman, which did not sit well with her, of course, and made her upset with him a bit, which obviously changes after years, which we know if you've read the manga, where that ends up. But since when she met everyone to begin with, and then after 5 years, there is a huge change in her personality, and that's because she's become more open to the idea and of freedom, really, of humanity, of making your own choices. And this was instigated when she met a creature that before she thought was just barbaric. Their race was a bunch of beasts, but as this was due to the divine staff which she used from the tower to mess with their minds and control them, and made them no more than just unresponsive beasts, really. So that was the only viewpoint she ever had. But after meeting Solomon and after everything changed, she was free from, the shackles of what perspective she saw. She only saw one side of it all, which was wrong, actually. And then once she actually met these creatures and met that they were intelligent and that she could befriend them, she felt so bad for what she had done, and that was when her personality really started to change. And that is when she slowly but surely becomes the person that we know as of now, which is 5 years after everything has happened. The beasts that she encountered were the manticores, and this was where the change began. It was when she befriended, as I said before, one of them, and the manticore, it was a child around, I would say her age, maybe younger, you can't really tell, but they became friends, they got to know each other, and eventually this manticore that she made, eventually turned into a mindless beast as well, and she was disheartened and distraught by the sight of this, and she actually calls Solomon and Ugo, those groups, she calls them mindless, she calls them villains, the worst villains that could ever exist, that they are the real problem here, which was very confusing, because they were the one who was saving these quote-unquote beasts, because they aren't really beasts, they had intelligence. And then when they asked her why, and she said it was because you saved me. Sheba said this, because they saved her. She was the worst type of human possible, she did all this monstrosity, and she said that she hated herself a lot, and because of this Solomon said, I like you now, from changing from the beginning. And then, that's when Solomon says, oh, we were like that before as well. And then this changes from her hating herself to trying to, in a sense, redeem herself for what she did and make better and peace with that. And, from there onwards, fighting to make a change. And after Solomon and his crew, after they saved all the manticores and all the other races, I won't get into the plot now, but there is kind of doubt that they could all live in this Almatoran, which Solomon proposes, which could be like a utopia for all races. And then Solomon gives this inspiring speech where he says we're all connected, and this can happen, and it's a very great speech. It's chapter 218 to 219 if you want to read it, around there, if I remember correctly. And that speech that inspires all the other races to, band together, that we really can be equal of humans, and peaceful utopia, a land like that, it can really exist. And then that inspires Sheba, a huge change in her character, and that inspires her to say, well, I want to do what Solomon just did. What an amazing person. I want to illuminate and shine, this great light on everyone else and inspire others and be a good person. Which is a major change from who she was not just too long ago, someone who was using the divine staff to unknowingly, well, not unknowingly, but didn't know about it otherwise. And I think that is, I was going to go into why that's a great kind of message, or if there's a deeper meaning, but that's not relevant to this video specifically, but I could get into that later. But as for her personality after 5 years, yes, there is more change. She becomes brighter, more open to everyone else. She becomes a better person, I suppose. Then from there onwards, after that 5 year period, a lot of stuff happened after that, where she becomes Solomon's wife, and there is a lot of history which I'm going to not talk about in the personality discussion, which I will talk about in the history part, but which maybe for this video I should have made personality the second part, so the history would already be there, but I guess that didn't really sort out too well. But either way, something happens where Solomon is no longer, I guess, he's there, he's alive, and he is there. It's just he's no longer responsive. That's a good word. And and then there's this whole debate about God and what Solomon did, which I will get into in the history. But this leads to a lot of magicians, mainly Arba, having a big, let's say, disagreement wouldn't be the right word. They no longer respected or followed Solomon. They were calling him arrogant, wrong. They even called him evil. And then this is the point where Sheba flips. She says, and who made Solomon king? Because Solomon did not want to be the king of everything, which he eventually does become after even many more years after that. And then they all question Solomon, his royalty, I guess. And then he never wanted to be royalty, but the people of Almatoran said that you have to be royalty, you have to be the king. And now that he is, they're saying he shouldn't be, he's arrogant, blah blah blah, he's wrong. And then rightfully so, Sheba says, and who made him the king? It was you people that made him the king, and now you question him. And this is where there's a huge change in Sheba's personality yet again, where she's the queen now of the Almatoran of the kingdom, but there is now kind of a resistance group within Almatoran led by Arba, and they don't approve of Solomon's methods and Arba, but the whole point is, Solomon's methods and Sheba. But the point is, Sheba changes drastically. She preaches about Solomon all the time, but it's her actual personality. She becomes, when looking at her, which you will be seeing now, very dreadful, very, in a way, I wouldn't say she's evil, because her ruh was dyed purely still white, but she was, in a way, devoid of emotions, of who she was. A lot of that disappeared, but it was still there though. When she talked to Solomon, who was still unresponsive, she still hoped that he might respond, but there was yet another personality change. And this is, honestly, it was interesting to see. It was very interesting to see, and there'd be constant debates with Arba and the other magicians, which eventually just led to a revolution, which led into her death, unfortunately. And she does revert back to her old ways, and before the whole revolution, she was reminiscing on the past. She was wondering why it couldn't be like before, when they were all friends and they were all talking. But alas, when she dies, there is, a change in her yet again. It seems that after she died and her ruh talked to Ugo, that she was back to her former self and she apologized to Ugo. And I will get into that in her history. But as for her personality, that is pretty much how her character and what her personality was like. And I guess I got into her character development as well, so I'll include that as well as one section. But her personality in general was a bright person, and there was drastic changes twice in her life. Well, it's been quite a long time since I've made this. That the first 10 minutes that you just saw, I recorded that in December. And I thought to myself, alright, I'll pick it up next week and I'll make the second half of this essay. Well, it is now currently near the end of May. It has been pretty much 6 weeks. So, yeah, I just edited the entire first part, so I listened as well, and I just reread the whole arc as well. So I've got a good grasp on what I'm going to do. One thing that I did mess up is that I thought for the beginning I was just talking about the personality and character development, but actually I somehow talked about the whole plot, her whole plot and history. So that all of it is just going to be the first section. Now, for the second section, I was going to talk about the relationships with other characters. Now, it's pretty standard with Yugo, Ethan, Falan, Wahid, those guys, Seta. She's pretty much good friends with them. Of course, Wahid and Falan being the ones who betray her, along with Adba, later on. But just in general, since she was a kid too. So she's older, beside the Almatoran betraying them stuff, she's pretty good friends with them. That's nothing special there. I guess with Ugo, there is kind of that more trust, because she doesn't trust Aladdin to Ugo. But other than that, there is not much there. So what I was mostly going to talk about was Solomon and Sheba, because those are like the motherly and fatherly figures to Adba. Now, obviously there's changes of Solomon, considering everything that does happen on, and they do eventually kind of get together, So I'll start off with Adba. So her relationship with Adba starts off pretty standard, like the rest of them, just friends. Actually, there is, because I was rereading it now, there is more of like a motherly figure at the very beginning. I mean, when everyone was picking on her, Adba actually still went to her side, to help her out. And the same with Solomon. He was kind of like the scolding father for Adba. Sheba, not Adba. So there's that aspect. Obviously, there's changes with both of them. For the next 5 years, it stays the same, but after that, she tries to create a relationship with Solomon, which eventually does work, and they have a child. Well, they're not alive when the child's born, but they conceive. And as we saw with Adba just recently, which I talked about, things went quite south with Adba, considering Adba was the one who killed her. So that's not really the best. Her other relationships with other characters that are significant would be the races that she, persuaded to come to Almatoran. The other little thing like Mu, I don't remember his name. I've just edited the whole video and I put so many pictures of his name. Like Mu, I think that was his name. Just give me 1 second. Okay, it is Momo. My bad. I've been editing all this and I still forgot Momo. I guess it's because he's a significant character, because that's what leads Oshri, that leads to the change of Sheba, right? From being hateful towards these creatures, not knowing what they are like, to actually liking them. Now, other than that, I guess there's the relationship with the people that live there, because she is the queen. Now, at first, it's a great relationship because everyone's happy, but then once Solomon becomes god, there's the divide, the rebellion. A lot of people aren't happy. There's a constant fighting with the other magicians, arguments, debates every day. So, I guess with the people, it's great at first. When Solomon becomes god, not so great. But to be quite honest, the relationships part I have already discussed. Like, all of it has been discussed from the very first section. So, and I don't know how I did that. I think I've somehow structured it incorrectly, because I recorded the first part really late at night. So I must have just rambled on about everything, which I shouldn't have done. I should have split up more, but I guess that's that. But for the most part, that is... Oh, and with Aladdin, there isn't really a relationship because she doesn't know him. I mean, she wasn't around when he was born, so there's that. But Aladdin wasn't actually born, wasn't he? He wasn't born. He was taken from the womb, and he was raised through magic. So he wasn't born via natural means. Interesting. So there's that. But yeah, now we're gonna get into the strength and abilities of Sheba, who is actually quite strong, to be fair. So, first of all, she's a user of one of these 72 divine staffs before Solomon kind of rewrites everything when he becomes a god. So there we go, she is like just incredibly powerful, able to use one of them, which we've seen. So she, at that point in time, at least during the flashback, was an incredible magician, capable of, just incredible levels of magic. Now, the main things that we see from her is the 8-headed Borg, Borg al-Sam. So the reason it's so powerful is because it's incredibly great on defense, because it's such a strong Borg, yet it's also an incredibly crazy offensive ability, because the Borg, while activated defensively, can stretch out into like 8 heads that can also attack. And in this regard, magicians actually called her a genius for doing this, because it's something that no one had ever done before. And it was also something that Aruba stole from her, because after the flashback, we see Hakuryu and Judel, when they fight Aruba actually copies this, and she says it's from a friend of mine from before, or someone I knew, a girl I knew, because I don't really think they were friends at the end. But yeah, incredibly powerful. Like, even Aruba, who'd been alive for thousands of years and arguably one of the strongest characters in the series, also, when she was at her peak, still used that technique, because it's just that powerful. Other than that, we don't actually get many other abilities from her, which kind of suck. I mean, I guess the flashback was centered more so on the history of how it all happened. We did get the 8-headed Borg. With a fight with Aruba, it's not really shown, it's kind of off screen, and we see like snippets, but it just cuts to her being killed. Other than that, there is something called life magic, which I guess she uses to, well, this was used to control the, other creatures so that they're mindless, and this was also used to slow down the growth of Aladdin. So basically, it's because of this ability, Life Force, that the lads, the magicians, Solomon, those guys, they can extend their life and look youthful, as Hugo said. Hugo? I think it's Hugo, right? As he said, and he explained to Sheba. So that's why they are like, I think some of them are even hundreds of years old during Almatoran, or like they're in their 70s. I think someone was over 100, yet they look like they're in their 20s. And that's also why Aruba looks so young during the, normal story, because of this Life Force technique, which I really appreciate if I could use, because that sounds incredible. Like, preserving your youth, come on, that is such a great ability. But other than that, and immortality, of course, not exactly, but in the eternal youth sense. Alright, now I'm just blabbing on about something completely unrelated. But in overall, I mean, I guess that is all there is to her abilities. I mean, obviously she can use many other spells, but we just haven't seen it, right? She's clearly very capable as a fighter, because she was holding her own against Adba before she got clapped eventually, because, Adba's Adba, like the strongest there is. Until, of course, end of series, Aladdin comes in, and then Sinbad doesn't even count. When Sinbad becomes a god, I don't even count that in debates, because, like, he's literally a god. Like, you can't win against that. So, arguably, I would say, like, Adba really is probably the second strongest character to have ever existed, beside God mode, any gods. I mean, maybe third, if we're putting her behind Solomon, because I put her behind Aladdin. So maybe like the third strongest in all of history, because like, for sure, Sinbad, no metal vessel. He could use as many as he wants, he's not taking it down. No metal vessel user is even touching Aruba. Like, she's just on another level. Even Yunnan, who I thought was like top 5 strongest, so at the time I thought he was like the strongest, even he got his cheeks clapped by Aruba, because she's just so powerful. And now I'm going on a tangent about Aruba, but the whole point is, Sheba did fare well against her, and she is incredibly powerful. So there is that aspect to take, and of course, Sheba is a Magi and the queen of Almatoran, so that counts for something. And of course, being a Magi with having limitless Ruh to use, obviously, that really helps in battle. So Sheba probably like top 10 all time. These lists are pointless, but in my head, it's nice to have like just relative scale how strong she is. Sheba definitely is like a top tier fighter in the Magiverse. So there's that for her strength and abilities. And I guess that's it. In conclusion, that is everything about Sheba, the queen of Almatoran, wife of Solomon, the warrior of the 8-headed Borg, Mother of Aladdin, quite a story, because the whole Al Matoran flashback actually, I would say she's definitely the main character, but until she dies, then it goes to Hugo. But until then, she really is the main character. Like, it goes from when they rescue her, yeah, that's where it starts, and most of it just takes place in her perspective, because it's just great, really. Because I thought that was a beautiful narrative to actually push, because she, obviously she's isolated from everyone, so when she's introduced to everyone, it's like we are learning as she is learning. So that is a great story plot thing that's used. Story device, sorry, that's the word I was looking for. A great story device that we used. Sometimes it's not done well, but I think in this case, done really well. Gave us a great perspective into the arc, and eased us into the whole world that we got into that arc. But of course, she makes no more appearances. If I'm remembering correctly, she never makes an appearance outside of the arc. I don't think. The Al Matoran flashback arc. I really do think that was it. I might be forgetting something, maybe a scene in another arc, but for the most part, I think that's it. That maybe she was mentioned by Aladdin later on, but never another appearance, which makes sense. Not all characters need to reappear. Her story was during her time, and that's where it ended, and her legacy and her torch was passed on to Aladdin. That's what I like to believe. So it was right that she was never brought back. Some stories are just meant to end. Anyway, that is pretty much it for Sheba. It was a lot shorter than I expected, mostly because I rambled on for the first 10 minutes without any... I just talked about everything, really, which I shouldn't have done. I didn't structure it well. So this is a lot shorter than the other ones. Well, I'm guessing at least, because this... I don't think... Has it reached 20 minutes? I'm not even sure. But next, I am not too sure on who to do. So if there's anyone, you think, just let me know. Because I was thinking about Judel. Judel, R and L's are mixed in Japanese. I'd say Judel. I was thinking about him, because he is quite a perplexing character, because I'm doing the Magi right now. Let me see. There aren't really that many other characters that I personally like, because my three favorites, first, most definitely Arba, my favorite character in Magi. My second is Yunnan. And Sheba, as for the Magi's ranking, she'd be like my third favorite. I guess next I could do Aladdin, Hugo, Judel, any Magi really, or the Magi of the Co-Empire, that empire as well. I found her the least interesting, mostly because she didn't get much time beside that one final scene she got with Aladdin and the guy, the proxy of hers, and Aladdin and Alibaba, the talk she had of them. But other than that, she didn't really get much, so I feel like that would be the last one I talk about. But yeah, let me know who next, and that's been it for Sheba. Pretty cool character.